Hello, horse lovers. Welcome to my new channel, Of Course a Horse. I've um, been making videos for my other channel, Remember the Magic, for a while now. And my sister Rue said, you love horses, and there's a million and one horse things out there, books, movies, TV shows you like to review. Why don't you start reviewing some of those? And finally, I got around to making this channel. So I thought a good debut video for this would be the show that inspired the name of the channel, which is, of course, Mr. Ed. And I'm pretty sure even if you've never seen the show, you know the theme song to know where I got the name of this channel from.
Hello, I'm Mr. Ed. Horses, of course, of course, of course.
So, yeah, that seemed like a good way to get started on my channel, was to talk about Mr. Ed. A lot of people have seen this show in reruns, and I've often heard it compared to a series of movies called Francis the Talking Mule. And there are similarities, talking mule, talking horse. But actually, this series starts way before that. It has its origin in a series of books called The Talking Horse by Walter R. Brooks. And they got well known enough that some people decided to get together and make a TV series of it. Now, this series almost didn't get greenlighted. George Burns, a famous comedian who I'm sure most of you are aware of, actually financially backed this project, and even Jack Benny got involved behind the scenes, another famous old time comedian. So there were some serious people for making this, but the initial pilot that they filmed didn't go over so well. Originally, it had a completely different cast and a different horse playing the part, and it just didn't work. So they decided, well, let's try this again with another cast. Now, to play the main human character of Wilbur Post, they had Alan Young. Now, if you are a Disney fan, you're going to know Alan Young is the voice of Scrooge McDuck, although you won't recognize his voice here because he did change it for the role, putting on a Scottish accent and altering his voice. But there is an episode of Mr. Ed where Alan Young plays both Wilbur and Wilbur's father. And when he plays that part, that was the first time he tried out the Scottish accent. So you can really hear how he is the same actor who played Scrooge McDuck.
I think you're making a mistake rushing into this marriage. After all, you're no kid, you know. I feel pretty young, Wilbur. Why don't we just sit down and talk this over? Two heads are better than one, even when one of them is yours. I think this marriage is a mistake, and I intend to put my foot down. And if you don't hold your tongue, you know where I'm going to put my foot?
Alan Young was hired because they said he looked like the kind of guy a horse would talk to. But they also needed the right horse for the job. The first horse they tried was pretty much a pain in the butt to work with. Different horses are cut out for different things, and that horse was just not meant to be an actor. Well, animal trainer Lester Hilton happened to come across a Palomino by the name of Bamboo Harvester, who was a parade horse a few years before. Now, a word about Palominos. Technically, Palominos are not a breed, because if you take two Palominos and breed them together, the foal will not necessarily be a Palomino, although they have been working on making Palominos into an official breed for quite a long time. And someday I'm sure they'll get there, but just not yet. Bamboo Harvester, who eventually did just come to be called Ed, was half saddlebred, and his mother was an Arabian cross. Now, I've ridden saddlebreds before. In fact, I learned to ride on saddlebreds, and they are great horses. You won't really recognize Ed as saddlebred because he's not the old time saddlebred. Unfortunately, saddlebreds are a breed where humans have done a lot of messing around and they now look completely different from what they did even a couple decades ago. I can kind of see the Arabian in him, and I'm sure he gets his intelligence from both sides. He took to learning the tricks really quickly. He also had very much a mind of his own. They said when he was done filming for the day, he would walk off the set and, okay, everybody go home. The horse is done. Not going to be able to do any more. He also knew when he was in trouble, and he would actually hide behind Alan Young, like, don't yell at me. They're being mean. So he had quite the personality. And he learned the trick of talking really quickly. Originally, they would put a string to tickle his lip, and they would pull that a little bit. But after a couple of times, he didn't need that anymore. He learned to associate the cue to talk with a touch of his hoof, and later, eventually, he just picked up on, oh, no one else is talking, my turn. One time, Alan Young, who became really good friends with the horse in real life, took him out for a ride for fun with a friend of theirs who was riding a different horse, and they stopped and dismounted, and the friend laughed and said, look at Ed. And there Ed was moving his mouth just as if they were filming. So, smart horse, he learned stuff really quickly. But as smart as Ed was, unfortunately he couldn't really talk. They needed a voice actor for that, and they found Alan Rocky Lane, who had been a pretty big name in westerns. Unfortunately for him, westerns were pretty much dying out, and he was actually sleeping on Lester Hilton's couch. And one day they were gathered around there and they were talking about what they were going to do for a voice actor. And Alan Young tells the story of how Rocky Lane came to be cast.
He was sleeping on Lester Hilton's couch, and that was it. So we're taking photograph publicity pictures, and suddenly we heard this voice come out, "Hey Lester, where'd you keep the coffee?" And everybody looked. That's Ed's voice.
Now that they had their cast in place, they were ready to refilm the pilot episode. I'm only going to go into the plot of this one because it establishes everything. I've said I will never review a series that has a continuous plot again. I've done one of those for my other channel, and it takes forever. It is way more work than I want to do. But since every episode of this can be viewed on its own, I consider Mr. Ed fair game for a review. So the pilot starts out with a newlywed couple, Wilbur and Carol Post. They moved out to the country for their first home, and Wilbur, who happens to be an architect, goes into the barn and he's discussing how he can make it into his office when he happens to find a horse that had been left there.
Right next to my drafting table, we could build cabinets. Karen, look.
A horse. But he wasn't here when we first looked at the place.
Well, maybe he was outside. How about that? A horse.
Ed had just been left there by his previous owners. The real estate man comes and tells the Post, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you about him. His old owners just left him here and they said that you can keep him, sell him, whatever you want to do with him. Wilbur, of course, wants to keep Ed right from the beginning. His wife Carol says, no, we're selling him. We can't afford him. Well, Wilbur decides to at least get him cleaned up. And that's when we get
Cleaning you up. The better you get to look, the more I want to keep you. Let's get started with the feet now, huh?
Now, this isn't really anything all that exceptional. Horses have great memories, and cleaning their feet is part of taking care of them, as any horse owner will tell you. And a lot of horses will learn, oh, okay, this is the next step in getting clean. I'm supposed to pick my feet up at this point. And a lot of them will learn cues from their owners, like foot or up, lift, that kind of thing. So they know when it's time to pick up their feet. But it soon becomes clear that Ed understands a lot more than that.
It's just hot in here. Should open the window.
Seeing how intelligent Ed is makes Wilbur want to keep him all the more. Carol doesn't agree, so Ed takes things into his own hands and actually fakes being lame when the horse dealer comes to take him away.
This horse is lame. Horse wouldn't be much use to you like that.
With the dealer unwilling to buy Ed, and Carol seeing how much Wilbur really wants to keep him, she finally gives in. And that's when the real comedy starts.
I'm gonna stay after all. Isn't that great? Oh, I never thought owning a horse could mean so much to me. Guess it's because when I was a little boy, I wanted a pony. Of course, it's been a long time since I was a little boy.
It's been a long time since I was a pony.
Even Wilbur doesn't believe what he's hearing. At least not at first. Who's going to believe a horse can talk? Unfortunately for Wilbur, he mentions this to others, and he's the only person Ed will talk to, at least directly. Throughout the series, we do see Ed talk to others, but only when it's over the phone and they can't tell that it's a horse talking. Or he'll talk to kids because, as he tells Wilbur, no one's going to believe a kid when they say, "Oh, I heard a horse talk." But Wilbur's the only one Ed will talk to directly, so when he tries to convince others and Ed won't talk to them, it looks like Wilbur's crazy. Ed actually helps Wilbur get out of this by telling him, use that. Let people think you're crazy in order to try to get out of the deal on the house. You'll get away with paying less money because they think you're crazy. Now, as weird as this sounds, it actually works. After that, Wilbur's careful to keep his mouth shut about Ed talking, except for in a few episodes where he wants to make money off Ed. He does this only twice in the series that I can remember. Once when he wants Ed to talk to George Burns, and another time he mentions the idea of Ed going on a TV show and doing that, but he agrees that it's okay if Ed only wants to do a few tricks to show he understands without actually speaking. There are other times when he wants Ed to talk to get him out of a situation. For example, there's one time when Ed witnesses a car accident, and although no one's hurt, Wilbur's car is damaged, and Ed saw who did it. Well, Ed, of course, can't speak up to say, "Yeah, I saw this." Now, that creates a lot of the comedy, times when it would be really handy to have Ed talk and he refuses to. A lot of the rest of the comedy comes from Ed wanting to do human things. For example, in one episode, he wants to drive a car.
We are going riding, rain or shine.
Oh.
And we're not going riding in a car.
Hey, why not? Why can't I ride in a car? My own private car.
You know, when I was a kid, of course, I loved the character Mr. Ed. I loved the comedy. And of course, I thought of what a smart horse he must have been to have learned all those tricks. But now that I've worked with horses, I'm not just impressed by how smart he was. I'm impressed by how willing this horse was. Because a lot of the tricks they have him do are things that horses don't like to normally do. For example, in one episode, they have him step in a pail. Horses do not like to step into things.
Mr. Ed just bumped into a tree.
Now, everybody's probably heard that horses always sleep standing up. That's a popular misconception. Not always true. Horses will lay down to get a deeper sleep, but they don't do that very often and not for long periods of time. It takes a fair bit to get a horse to lay down. And so for them to have Ed lay down as often as they do on the show, that took quite a willingness on his part too. And there's one memorable episode where he decides he actually wants the kind of bed that a human sleeps in. It's a cute image, but watching it now, like I said, I'm really impressed that they got him to actually do this trick.
Carol sees this, she'll leave me for sure.
Feel this sheet, Wilbur. Genuine silk.
This bed has got to go.
Please, Wilbur. I'm not wearing pajamas.
I think that's so cute that he not only lays down but covers himself up. That had to take a lot to train this horse. Like I said, it shows not only his intelligence but his willingness to learn. Now, I've talked about most of the comedy coming from Ed wanting human things, him wanting to check out human situations. Like, hey, you got a bed, that looks comfortable. I want one of those. But a lot of the comedy also comes from the rest of the cast, including the neighbors, and I haven't talked about them yet. Ed frequently raids the apple trees of the first set of neighbors on the show. Roger Addison, played by Larry Keating, has a special hate-hate relationship with Ed.
Nice horsey.
Hey, what is the idea of giving my horse a wax apple?
If that plug steals any more of my apples, you're going to have a wax horse.
Tragically, Larry Keating died of leukemia during the third season. And instead of just replacing the actor, they made the decision to move on to a different set of neighbors. They had Wilbur's former commander from the Army move in next door, Gordon Kirkwood. He has not much interacting with Ed, but he and Wilbur make good foils for each other.
After all, we are old army buddies. We shouldn't fight.
Thanks, Gordon.
We'll let our lawyers fight.
There's no doubt that they had a wonderful cast for this show, but they also had quite a few amazing guest stars. There's one episode where Zsa Zsa Gabor came on the show, and they had like she was afraid of horses, and Ed had to help her overcome that for a movie role. There was an episode where Ed was jealous of Clint Eastwood's horse. One episode that I really like doesn't actually have the guest star officially meet Ed, but I think it's neat that they had George Burns on the show since he actually helped back it. So it makes sense that he would appear in an episode.
On the phone now, huh? My horse. Hello, horse. Hello, Burns. You're a horse and you talk, huh? Yes, but not to you. Goodbye.
Even with the best cast in the world, though, a show isn't going to connect to people if it doesn't have heart to it. And the heart of this show was, of course, Ed's personality. He could come off as a bit of a spoiled kid at times, and I'm sure anybody who's ever had any animal in their life can relate to that. But he does clearly love Wilbur, and he does have a kind heart, especially towards children. I actually found this online. I had to get it as a collector's item if I can get it in the camera right. Mr. Ed the Talking Horse, a little golden book. And that tells a story where Ed invites kids from the local orphanage out to the farm for the day. And it's really sweet. Ed is shown to have a great love of kids in the show, and there's one episode where he won't help Wilbur bet on the races until he finds out that the money that they would win in the bet goes to help kids.
Say, Wilbur,
Yeah?
you should have told me it was for the milk fund.
And for all the great comedy writing, the show wouldn't have worked if the friendship between Wilbur and Ed didn't work. I especially love this one poem Ed writes. I think it's really cute.
Life is a feed bag overflowing with oats, a bag that should never be shut, and a horse that would leave a sweet guy like you must be some kind of a nut.
You can tell that they had a great relationship in real life too, Ellen Young and Ed. And after the show ended, Ellen often went out and took him for rides, just visited him, just spent time together like any two good friends. Tragically, Ed's life ended a little sooner than it probably would have had to. He wasn't a young horse during the show. He wasn't old, but he wasn't young either. And a few years after the show ended, Lester Hilton went out of town and left the horses in care of somebody who didn't know that Ed had a habit of laying down and rolling like a lot of horses love to do. Only he had a little bit of trouble getting back up again sometimes, just needed a little bit of leverage. Well, the friend saw Ed not being able to get back up and thought he was sick, hurting, something's majorly wrong with his horse, and he gave him a tranquilizer that proved to be too much for him. Alan Young told that story, and he was, of course, very saddened by Ed's loss. The rest of the cast went on to other projects, and I think any actor wants to know that they left a legacy behind. There was an attempt once to remake the series with the setting updated, of course, to modern times, and the comedy from that would have been Ed helping Wilbur raise his kids, doing things behind the scenes, making phone calls to friends, that kind of thing. And in that new pilot, Ed would have been played by Sherman Hemsley, who is best known as George Jefferson. Now, I love the Jeffersons, I love Sherman Hemsley, but there's only one Mr. Ed, and the pilot never got picked up, and I'm glad it didn't because some classics you just don't want to ruin the memories of what was. I really enjoyed the show as a kid. I still do. I hope you enjoyed hearing me talk about it. Um, if you enjoyed this, hit like and subscribe to my new channel. I'm going to be talking about everything to do with horses. I'm going to have a lot of movie and TV show reviews as well as reviewing books. You'll get to see my pony Bucky and the things that I'm doing with him. I'm going to be training him in a lot of new stuff this spring and summer. I also am going to be talking about classic horse toys that I enjoyed as a kid, Breyers, Grand Champions. So basically anything horses will be talked about. So hit that subscribe button and keep riding.